Guys, welcome back into tier rankings of another potential super conference here with a 20-team SEC with the additions being Clemson, Florida State, Miami, and North Carolina. And I'm just going to be tier ranking all of these teams. You can take a look at the tiers, playoff contenders, above average. That's like a team 8 to 9 wins, average 6-7 wins, below average, and then worst. It's all pretty self-explanatory there. But we will start with Oklahoma. So Oklahoma, I do think I have to place them in the playoff contenders tier. A lot of people don't talk about it, but Oklahoma kind of got screwed with this SEC move. I mean, they were living the high life in the Big 12, constantly making New Year's Six games. Now they've got to go to the SEC with a brand new coach and a completely different culture. You go from all offense and no defense to all defense and no offense with Brett Venables. We will see how it turns out. I think they should have a pretty good year with Dylan Gabriel as the transfer QB. But to me, they're kind of a back-end playoff team, and I am doing this with the assumption that the playoff will expand to 12 teams. With a 12-team playoff, I think Oklahoma, even in this tough conference, could still make it because 12 teams get in. Next, we have Kentucky. So Kentucky, I think if I was just to rank this year, I'd put Kentucky in the above average category. But in terms of their overall future outlook with a super conference, I would say average. They simply don't recruit well enough. I know they've been tapping into Ohio, taking some, 3 stars there, going into Michigan, things like that. They are slightly recruiting better, and they're certainly playing better on the field, taking advantage of a weak SEC East. But in a super conference, it's going to be very tough if they don't step up their recruiting game to really win 8 or 9 games per season. So I'm going to say average for them. Next, we have Vanderbilt. They will probably be the only team that goes into the worst category. I don't know why the worst category is green. That makes me angry. We're going to change that to red, and then we're going to change the playoff contenders to green and actually color code it. There we go. So Vanderbilt is probably the second or third worst team in terms of Power 5. I believe Duke is scheduled to be the worst team this year, at least according to metrics, and also Kansas is right there as well. But Vanderbilt, they're always horrible. They recruit terribly. They're an academic institution. We know that, so I don't see it improving. I don't know how it would. Next, we have LSU. They're a pretty tough team to rank, but I'm going to say above average due to the talent pool they have in the state of Louisiana, and they recruit unbelievably in that state. They're always going to have a really talented roster, but personally, I hate the Brian Kelly hire. I think it's oil and water. I think Brian Kelly doesn't fit their culture at all. In fact, Notre Dame fans are thanking Brian Kelly for leaving because the second Brian Kelly left Notre Dame, they started recruiting better. So for LSU, I still think they'll recruit well, but being a playoff contender with Brian Kelly, I think he signed a 10-year contract. I would put the over-under at how long he's there at around 3.5 years, and I'd take the under. I just think it's a mess. It's a terrible fit. So I will say above average. Next, we have Auburn. I am not high on Auburn at all. I'll put them in front of Kentucky because they recruit better than Kentucky, and they always play Alabama tough. But in their current situation, if we get a 20-team SEC Super Conference, you're already facing Alabama every single year because they're the rival. It's just such a tough situation to be in their current coaching situation where, there were people within the program that tried to void the contract of the head coach. It is a complete and total dumpster fire there. I think they go 6-6 this year and lose their non-conference game to Penn State. But I will put them over Kentucky because they've shown in the past you have to respect. They did make the national title back in 2013 against FSU. They've beaten Bama several years. And I think they've made a few New Year's Six games. So I will put them in the upper echelon of average, but they're a program that is trending down, in my opinion. Next, we have Ole Miss. So Ole Miss is kind of a hard one. I think I'm going to put them in the back end of above average with Lane Kiffin. It's very tough to project what Ole Miss is going to be as a program in 3 or 4 years because Lane Kiffin normally doesn't stay for very long. A lot of this is going to depend on what Lane Kiffin does. I'm sure they want to keep him because he does attract elite offensive talent, Jackson Dart, Zach Evans, young college quarterbacks, high school quarterbacks want to play for him in that offense, so I will say above average due to the way they produce talent or due to the way Lane Kiffin produces talent, and they have beaten Alabama a few times, and they do face Alabama at home this year, so I'll say above average, but overall I'm not entirely optimistic about their future because there is a lot of unknowns with Lane Kiffin. Next, we have North Carolina, who is definitely a team that is wanted by the Big Ten and the SEC. I'm going to say average, and I'm going to say right on par with Kentucky. So Mac Brown is recruiting really well. They're actually recruiting better than Kentucky is. They're recruiting the state of North Carolina amazingly. Last year I think they got a 5-star defensive tackle over Clemson, Travis Shaw. So they're recruiting really well. They kind of had a down year last year. Sam Howell not playing as well as everyone thought he was going to be, kind of a dark horse Heisman that didn't live up to it. So North Carolina, I'll say average. It's such a tough conference. They are, they are wanted by both the Big Ten and the SEC, but their football team, they just don't recruit well enough to contend with some of these top teams. Mississippi State, I'll probably say the back end of average or below average. I probably will go the back end of average because they always seem to at least get to 6 wins. I just don't know about their future with the whole air raid system in the SEC. It just doesn't seem to be a good enough strategy. If you have a talented enough quarterback and absurdly talented receivers, maybe. But when you're so focused on just throwing, and you've got no running game, and you're in a conference like the SEC, when you lack that much balance, it's very tough to win consistently, and this super conference would only make it harder. So I'll say the back end of average. South Carolina, I'll say the front end of below average. I think they're very similar to Mississippi State. We will see with Spencer Rattler, but overall, when it comes to recruiting, they don't recruit well enough. It's as simple as that. Some of these teams are it's just a recruiting thing. You're in a loaded conference like this. It is very tough to contend with these teams when you're facing someone that is just so much more deep, that has 10 more 5-stars on their roster than you do. The talent difference really starts playing out. So I would definitely put them below these other teams as well. Next, we have Arkansas. So I would say Arkansas in terms of this conference would be average. I would kind of put them maybe in front of North Carolina, depending. This year they should be a fringe top 25 team with KJ Jefferson. They got an elite wide receiver from Oklahoma to transfer as well. And they always seem to have decent seasons, never anything special. So maybe a 7-win type team in this conference. But overall, it's just, again, it's a recruiting thing. They don't recruit well enough. It's really, you could change these a number of different ways. They're interchangeable here in the middle. Next, we have Florida. So I will say Florida is above average, and I will put them right next to LSU. Very similar in terms with LSU to where they've been underperforming a lot of these years with elite talent. We'll see how they are. They did make a New Year's Six game a few years ago and got crushed by Oklahoma when all their players sat out. But they were just in a New Year's Six game, so they definitely have the program potential to be a playoff contender. But I need to see it. With a new head coach, I need to see them recruit well for a few years and have good, successful seasons. Anthony Richardson, what a massive unknown that is. It could work out. It could not work out. Huge week 1 game at home in Gainesville versus Utah for them. Next, we have Texas A&M. I've got to do it. I have to put them in the playoff contenders category and in front of Oklahoma. It's based off of the 2022 class. The influx of overall talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball. We all know the story. They signed the greatest recruiting class in history. And I think the biggest problem for Jimbo Fisher and this A&M program will be managing the locker room. You've got several 17, 18-year-old kids who are making 7-figure NIL deals. How are you able to manage the egos in that locker room and prevent a mass transfer exodus, through the portal? Because it is so easy for these kids just to say one day I'm transferring and starting somewhere else the next year. We saw that with Jordan Addison. So for A&M, it's all about managing the locker room, making sure you have an elite quarterback, and the rest of your roster is so just supremely talented. they will definitely be a playoff contender. Next, we have Tennessee. So Tennessee, I'll say, is the front end of average, and they're trending up, in my opinion, but I need to see a legitimate good year from them before I'm moving them up to above average. So Hayden Hooker, the offense looks good, but I need to see a 9-win season, I think. That's why they're still at the front end of average for me. Missouri is probably the most irrelevant program in the SEC outside of Vanderbilt. No one seems to talk about them. They had that, a few years with Drew Lock and whatever, but overall very similar to South Carolina. They simply don't recruit the talent to be competitive in a super conference like this. Next, we have Miami. So Miami, I'm going to put towards the end of the playoff contenders. I am 100% buying Miami, Mario Cristobal, the overall NIL thing they have. They're getting 5 stars left and right in the state of Florida. They've got a great talent pool. And I think they could make a New Year's 6 game this year. That was one of my bold predictions. The schedule would get tougher if they do transition and move to the SEC, but the talent influx, the coaching is going to be so much better. I am high on the U going forward. Next, we have Florida State. So for Florida State, I guess I'll just put them in the middle of average. At this point with Florida State, you have 1 down year, okay. You have 2 down years, You have 3 down years. They've had like 5 down years at this point. It's getting to be a trend. They've made a few really bad coaching hires. I think they've got to rip the Band-Aid off and fire their coach and start fresh. I know it's demoralizing, but that's what I think they have to do. The Travis Hunter recruitment really, I'm guessing, demoralized that program. The number 1 overall player in the nation, committed to your team for over 2 years, and then on National Signing Day, flips because of an NIL deal to Jackson State. It's just a horrible story. I feel bad for Florida State, but it's the day and age we live in, and I think they're probably going to go 6-6, maybe 7-5 in the ACC this year. Next, we have Texas. So Texas, I don't think yet I can put them as playoff contenders. The difference, so everyone always says Texas is overrated, whatever. I'm telling you guys, the difference now is they actually have 2 legit superstar quarterbacks. You've got Quinn Ewers. You've got Arch Manning. They have not had quarterback talent like this since Colt McCoy or maybe even Vince Young. They're extremely, extremely talented. They're recruiting other positions really well. They've got a ton of money, and they're ready to win. Texas is on the rise. I can't move them to playoff contenders yet. I need to see a good year out of them where they make a New Year's 6 bowl game. But I'm telling you guys, they're ready to invest, and they are on the rise. Next, we have Clemson. So Clemson, I think you have to put towards the front of the playoff contenders category. People overreacted to them. They had a bit of a down year last year, but they still won 10 games, and their recruiting is still really good with Dabo. They're bringing in the number 1 overall quarterback from the 2022 class. They're going to be fine, and their defense is crazy good this coming season. They are loaded, so Clemson is still going to be one of the top teams in college football, even going to the SEC, in my opinion, just based off of how they're continuing to turn out talent and recruit so well, even after the down year. Next, we have Georgia. So Georgia, I'm going to have to show them respect and put them at the front of the playoff contenders category in front of A&M. This is a team that reloads. They don't rebuild. They're constantly signing top 3 classes. They're consistently signing for multiple 5 stars, multiple top 100 players. The one question I would have with Kirby Smart, do they have a good enough offense to sustain and be a legitimate super program of college football? That's my one question. I know their defense is amazing. I know they won last year because of their defense, but is that a sustainable way to win? It'll be interesting. They do have a superstar tight end, Brock Bowers. Wow, is he a beast. Next, we've got the final team, Alabama. So Alabama, obviously, you have to put as the number 1 playoff contender, the number 1 team overall. The only question with Alabama at this point we can ask is, at what point does Nick Saban retire? When projecting forward with Alabama, I'd say that's the one big question. Does he have 5 years left? Does he have 7 years left? That's really the only thing we can talk about. Alabama is absolutely ridiculous. They're constantly signing the number 1, number 2 overall class in the nation. It is stupid, and it is amazing. So you take a look at this list, guys. This conference is just loaded. Like, legitimately. And all of these teams in the above average category, they have the potential based on how well they recruit outside of Ole Miss to be a playoff contender. I mean, the conference is just loaded. So this is the overall ranks right here, in my opinion, the potential SEC 20-team super conference, guys. That's going to do it for this video. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.